work session of the Union County Board of Commissioners to order, and I'll turn it over to County Manager Brian Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we have a work session here to talk about water and sewer. There are a number of items on the agenda related to water and sewer. A good bit of it at the beginning is a refresher. We throw a lot of information at you over the years, and we certainly have a new board member here. So this is not intended to certainly be any kind of recap, but we do want to refresh so you see some of this information again. It's also for the public to be able to see the context of what we're talking about, so anyone that is watching that's here present, they can understand some of the past information on that. I'm going to turn this over to Hung. They're going to go through a number of slides. We can take a break at any time the board feels it's necessary. Just let us know. And then we'll end up really with sort of a discussion about some direction that we need from the board. So I'll turn it over to Hung from here.
Thank you, County Manager Brian Matthews. Good evening, Commissioners. It's always a pleasure, and we're looking forward to presenting all this information to you. And in a second, I'm about to introduce the staff who worked on this. But I just want to take you and the public through what we're going to cover tonight. So sort of very quickly, and I'm not kidding when I say we're going to try to get through this as quickly as we can, because this information is really just sort of one of the main ingredients for the discussion. And I think that's the key part, is the discussion. And that part we're going to try to get to as fast as we can, so you have as much time to discuss all the things that you need to talk about. And at that point, that's when Brian's going to facilitate that particular part. But we're going to talk about the water system, interbasin transfers, simply because that is so important to how we run the system. The wastewater system, then we're going to start talking about the 23 master plan, give you a little bit of refresher on sort of where we are with that. And then we're going to take you through all the capital projects that Brown and Caldwell shared with us, the work that we've done with that list of projects, and sort of some of the decisions that's before the board right now. And then along the way, we'll cover sewer allocation, methodology, and some other things that are sort of outside the master plan, but also important and do factor into the CIP. So here, the purpose is really a couple of things. Show you how an utility operates for your benefit, for the public's benefit. Sort of, again, tell you where we are with the master plan, the potential projects resulting from the master plan, and then ask for direction from the board as to how you want us to proceed, because our next set of analysis, the next set of things that we're about to do really requires for the board to give us direction on how you want us to proceed, what you want us to include. So before I do any of that, real quickly, my name is Hung Yee. I am the Union County Water Administrator, and I'm about to introduce some staff to you because these folks are the ones leading the utility. And so I'm going to start with what I would say the long-range picture, the long-range planning. Aubrey Lofton is the Planning and Resource Management Director. She does all of our long-range planning, the IBT, the systems, the GIS, all those things. John Shutak, who's to her right, is the Engineering Director, and two over is Chris Clark. This is, I think, the 8th day for Chris Clark. You may remember Andy Neff, who was the Wastewater Operations Director. Chris Clark is the man we hired to replace him. And then it's worth also noting to Chris's right is Josh Brooks, whom you've seen many times, and he's also the Assistant Director working with Chris. And so it's, and we wanted to just recognize him because he has an important role as well. And then last but not least, Amy McCaskill runs the business operations. So if Aubrey is looking out 20 years, John's looking out 2 to 10. Chris is right now because I got to run the system, and Amy is 30 days behind because she's doing the billing. That's sort of how I put it all together. At the same time, Amy's also the hub because she's got customer service. And when the call comes into customer service, she can reach out to whoever she needs to make sure it gets resolved. Oftentimes we'll get calls from Brian, oftentimes on your behalf, to resolve issues, and it funnels to Amy, and she's the one that handles it all. Union County Water is 175 employees managing the system. There are 11 within Planning and Resource Management, and you can see some of the functions that they are responsible for. Master Plan, GIS is Geographic Information Systems, IBT is Interbasin Transfers, Engineering, water, wastewater operations, business operations. Again, the one area that I didn't talk about is health and safety. We have one individual whose job it is to make sure that all of us go home the way we came, with all our fingers and toes. And so far, he's been pretty successful at it because everyone's gone home. So with that, let's move into the water system, and this is going to be fast. And I'm going to use some illustrations because sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so what you're seeing here is basically it's how a water system operates in one picture. Oftentimes you'll see me talk about plants, pipes, and pumps. And the last thing, I wish it began with a P because that way it would, I'd have 4 Ps, but I got 3 Ps and we tried a couple of things. Sky Pond worked, but it's just a water storage tank. That's what it is. Sky Pond, I'm trying to make it happen, but we'll see whether that works or not. So on your left, you're going to see the water treatment plant. They produce the water, they put it through a pipe, a transmission main. Oftentimes it will go to a storage tank, and I will tell you why a storage tank is important, because we generate pressure 2 ways. One, a pump is pushing water through the system, and the second is gravity. We pump water up, and we let gravity generate the pressure in the system for us. So oftentimes when we talk pressure zones, we're talking about the elevation between where the water is, how high it is, versus the ground. Booster pump stations are often necessary to continue pushing the water to give it a boost along the way because it loses pressure. And then you'll see that houses connect to service laterals. Oftentimes they will not connect to a transmission main, so a large diameter 42, 36-inch main will have branches. It's like a highway system. A super highway will have branches, divided highway will have streets, and then country roads, that sort of thing. Same with us. If you think of the transmission main as a highway, we typically wouldn't want to connect a driveway to a highway. It'd be like putting your driveway on the Monroe bypass. You could do it, probably wouldn't be safe. And so, as the lines get smaller, eventually you'll connect to a home. You take that sort of conceptual design of a water system and you apply it to Union County, and what you are seeing, we'll start with the county, obviously, and then you'll see these colored regions. Those are our service areas. They're colored because each service area is a different pressure zone. And so you'll see the number 853 east, 821, 762. That tells you the elevation. You'll see the blue lines again. Those are our water lines. P stands for pumps, T stands for tanks, water storage tanks above ground. And then over here, all the way on the left, you see the Catawba River Water Supply Project, which is basically the water plant that generates the 80% of our water. You'll see this ridge line is important to us because to the left is the Catawba River Basin, to the right is the Yadkin River Basin, and it's important because you see these 2 pressure zones cross that boundary. That means we're pushing Catawba water across the ridge line into the Yadkin Basin. And that's an interbasin transfer. There are all sorts of state rules that govern what we have to do as a result of that, and we'll go into it in more detail. And off to the right is Anson County. We get 3 to 5 MGD a day of water from Anson County, and they are our second source of water. Any area that is white is not a service area, so the city of Monroe has its own water supply. Embedded in the purple is Wingate and the town of Marshville. Both of them, Wingate gets their water from us, Marshville buys their water from Anson County. We do have emergency interconnects with Lancaster Water and Sewer, who's our partner in South Carolina, also with Charlotte Water. And you see how the water flows through this animation. And there you go. And water from Anson County feeds the east part of the county. The Catawba River and the Water Supply Project feeds the west part of the county. Well, as you all know, you were at the ribbon cutting. We're almost complete with the Yadkin water plant and the Yadkin Water Supply Project. When that is complete, we're going to pull water from Lake Tillery. That's our water intake at Lake Tillery in the town of Norwood. It'll follow this blue line, which is the raw water line, to this greenish dot, which is the water plant near New Salem. And then it connects via these solid blue lines, the finished water line, to the rest of our system. And the intention is to feed, the west-north part of the east and north part of the county through the Yadkin River Supply Project, and the Catawba River Supply Project will feed the west and the south. You'll also note, that the ridge line still goes here. You'll see this green area is sort of a blend. We're going to have to manage the water there because of the IBT and the way the water and the sewer system works. And so water will be pushed across the ridge from the Catawba River, and it will have to be returned. In this future, in our sort of near future, Anson County is no longer a provider of water to us. They are what we would view as a emergency interconnect. If we should have a problem, we could ask them for help and they can send us water, and that would be about the extent of it. Our relationship with Lancaster Water and Sewer remains the same, and our relationship with Charlotte Water stays the same. This, again, wrong way. It's similar, but it's just easier to see sort of the water supply project and the lines, the finished water line headed across to the west. And then you've already approved a project to connect the water plant to the water mains down near Wingate. The other thing I would point out to you on the left, if you see it, it says water infrastructure. It gives you just a small snippet of information about the number of assets that we maintain to run the water side of the utility. So we have 1.5 water plants, given that we share the Catawba River Water Supply Project. We have over 1,100 miles of water pipe. We have 10 water tanks throughout the county, 15 pump stations, over 5,500 fire hydrants, and almost 20,000 valves throughout the system that we have to maintain on a regular basis. And if you recall, we do it with less than 180 people. So again, raw water intake, transmission main, water plant, finished water main, and then that's the future 762 transmission main headed south. Just in case you're wondering, I wanted to point this out to you. These are our sort of utility relationships that we currently have. Anson County is going away, but we are a buyer of water from them. Charlotte Water, we buy water from them. We also buy sewer from them. Lancaster Water and Sewer is a partner. We have a contractual relationship with them. We buy water from them through a lease if we need it. Monroe is a seller of sewer to us, and we are a seller of water to them. The town of Norwood is a partner, and the town of Wingate is a partner on the IBT, and we are a seller of both water and sewer services to the town of Wingate. Just to note that in addition to these, there are also private utilities that operate small, typically on the sewer side, package plants. Aqua Incorporated and Utilities Incorporated are the primary two that we found in Union County, and they operate here. We the county, we the utility, we have no regulatory oversight over these private utilities. It's done through the state, through DEQ. They can operate here as a business, just like any other. Interbasin transfer, so I'm going to turn it over to Aubrey to take you through that.
Good evening, Commissioners. We included just a few slides here, just given the nature of interbasin transfers and how important they are to how we function, both the water and the wastewater systems here in Union County. And that is a unique feature of Union County, that they really do tie those two together in terms of our planning. Not all utilities have to plan that way, but because of this interbasin transfer law and where we're located in North Carolina, it is a requirement for us. So just as a kind of an overview, it is governed by general statute, and essentially if you're moving more than 2 million gallons of water per day from one river basin to another, then you're going to require an interbasin transfer certificate. They also have allowance for when the law went into effect in 1993, so any infrastructure that was in place at that time, we were allowed to get a grandfathered exemption essentially for certain capacity. So I'll give you a little bit more overview specifically how this applies with us here in Union County. So if you can see the way that the river basins are defined by North Carolina, it's essentially any of these black lines here is considered a river basin. You can see the thicker black lines are the major river basins, but any line here, if you're crossing one of these lines, you're required to have an interbasin transfer certificate to move that water or a grandfathered exemption. So for us, we are located in the Catawba Basin and predominantly in the Rocky River Basins, roughly 3/4 of Union County. But we don't have a major river going through the county itself. So that's also led to the partnerships that you just saw, right? That's why we have all of these partnerships with other utilities, because we don't have these water sources available to us. So if you're moving water from any of these basins, again, across those black lines, and it's more than 2 million gallons per day, it's going to require a certificate. So we move 5 million gallons per day. We have permission to move 5 million gallons per day from the Catawba to the Rocky River Basin, and 23 million gallons per day from the Yadkin Basin to the Rocky River. So just to show you what that looks like for us currently. So again, the grandfathered amount that we have from Catawba to Rocky River, we have a net of 5 million gallons per day. So that means if we send more than 5 million gallons per day, we have to return some water. So we currently send anywhere between 3.5 to 5 million gallons per day across that boundary. It just depends on the weather. Certain times of year, summer, we send more for irrigation. And then we send roughly 1 million gallons per day on average back from the Poplin Road pump station. So overall, our net IBT is between 2.5 and 4. So we're in compliance there. Since March of this year, we have been serving the northern part of the county, the A53 East pressure zone, from Catawba rather than Anson. And that's predominantly due to the fact that they have trouble serving us. So it's just been a short-term fix while we're waiting for the Yadkin to be online. But because of that, that means that we've been sending an extra 1 million gallons per day this year. So hopefully when Yadkin's online soon, we'll be back to our normal operations in that normal range. And you can see we did start flowing, excuse me, we did start flowing water from the Yadkin to the Rocky River earlier this year for the plant construction activities, activation, flushing, all of that activity. So I'd expect those flows to change in the future because we're still doing that startup work. And because we have this IBT certificate, there are stringent requirements that come with those. We have to have conservation drought management plans that are the most stringent in that basin. We cannot sell that water to others except for the town of Wingate because they were a co-applicant with us. And the Environmental Management Commission can amend that certificate with certain qualifications. And because we started flowing that water this year, we do have to report on a quarterly basis to DEQ. So just want to give you that update.
So, well, again, we're moving quick, so if we're going to talk about the wastewater system, unless I want to just pause and ask if there's any questions about anything you've seen so far related to water or the IBT. Okay, sorry.
I've got a question. So I'm looking at the slide there about the conditions in the Yadkin Interbasin Transfer Certificate. The second bullet says required to have the most stringent water conservation and drought management plans in Yadkin Basin, unable to sell Yadkin water to any entity other than Wingate. So where is this requirement coming from? Is this a state requirement?
It's essentially because that they were the only applicant, they're co-applicant. So to sell to other parties, we'd have to amend that certificate, which is a similar-ish process to pursuing an IBT in the first place.
Yeah. And if we wanted to pursue amendment of that certificate, what would the process entail? I mean, just roughly, if you can speak to that.
So I believe there's only maybe been one certificate in the history of North Carolina that's been amended. So this isn't a well-established process, so I can't give you a lot of specifics. The original IBT for us took roughly 4 years. It was approximately $4 million in terms of the effort for us. I would assume it's a lighter, shorter process, but not necessarily substantially shorter.
So I'm sorry, you said 4 years and then 4 million?
Roughly, yes. In terms of all the consulting fees and studies, there's a lot of public notice, a lot of public hearings, so.
Right, so, again, as Aubrey said, there's not really a superly defined process because there's only been one that we're aware of. You'd have to petition the EMC to reopen that certificate, and then, of course, you'd have to go through all of those public notice and public hearings through that process to allow all of those other entities to be able to comment on what you're asking for as far as any amendments to that.
In the original certificate, we also did an environmental impact statement, so presumably would have to revise that to show what the impact of that water transfer would look like with a new sale or a new purchase. If we wanted to increase our limit, any of those changes would be an amendment to the certificate and require that lengthy process.
Okay, one other question. So obviously, soon on Yadkin, do we have any kind of timetable, any kind of update as far as when we can expect Yadkin to be fully operational?
I'm going to punt that one to Mr. Shutak.
Sorry to put you on the spot, John.
Not a problem at all. So yeah, you all were at the ribbon cuttings, some months back. We've been working through the last of the commissioning processes. We are at the point now where we will be submitting the final paperwork to NCDEQ for approval. There is one last piece of commissioning work that'll need to be done that'll take about a week. With the holidays upon us, the Union County staff actually will not be taking over the plant until starting January 15th is the date that we have tentatively scheduled, provided everything falls into place with the regulators.
Thank you, John.
And if you're wondering, well, what are we going to do between December 31st and January 15th if the contract with Anson Water is expired or canceled? We've talked to Anson Water. They're fine. They're happy to supply us with water for as long as we need it, as long as we're willing to pay for it. Before I get started on the wastewater system, it's probably obvious to you at this point, but there is a binder at your seat, and it's got the whole entire presentation in there in case you're wondering. And behind that are several very large spreadsheets, which I'm going to give John the privilege of going over when we get to that point. So I'm not going to mention anything about it other than to say those are the two things that we handed out today. We also gave you a binder because if I was a betting man, I'd say we're probably going to come back to you sometime next year and do more PowerPoint presentations. So we just wanted to give you a place to house them all as we give them to you. So we'll just give you another presentation with another tab, just ask you to put it on top of the binder that you got. And if we run out of space in the binder, we'll get you a bigger one. So that's our plan. So with that, the wastewater system. So how does the sewer work? So if in water, if it's plants, pipes, pumps, sky ponds. Then on the sewer side, it's really the reverse of that. It's basically what we call the collection system, all sort of connected to the conveyance system, basically your transmission mains for sewer, and then flowing to the wastewater treatment plant. So from your home, your service laterals connect you to the sewer main. To the extent that we can, we will flow by gravity. Gravity is free and it never fails. And so we use gravity as much as we can. Sometimes we have to lift it, so we have pump stations. You've often had to deal with pump stations as well with some of these developments. But we will then pump it or lift it to a higher elevation and then allow gravity to then again to sort of take it to the next step. And then we'll, service laterals, conveyance corridor, treatment plant. That's how, in a nutshell, the sewer system works. Collection, conveyance, treatment plants, lift stations, sewer capacity. When we get to a slide, I'm going to just ask John to put a pen in it, but talk about the weakest link when we get there, because it's probably easier with a map than it is on a bullet. All facilities are permitted by NCDEQ for process limits in terms of what the quality of the water that we have to return to the environment. And we've talked about this a couple of times. Getting a new permit takes a long time. This is not a quick process for us. So getting a permit for a treatment plant can take anywhere from 4 to 6 years.
Right, and I want to clarify, that's the permit, that's not construction time frame. So if you want to, like, from start to finish, that's 8 to 10 years. So about 4 years or so to get a permit, and then another 4 years or so to build the facility.
And I will, again, leave it to John to go over some of the details, because we do have some schedules to show you what that looks like. So for Union County, the map on the right, we have about 670 miles of gravity pipe, which is all the green. We also have about 74 miles of force main, which are the yellow, to move flow around. There are over 60 pump stations throughout the system, and so all these little white boxes with a P and an S in it stand for pump station. There are over 18,000 manholes throughout the system. We have 5 treatment plants. 12 Mile down here is our largest. Right now it sits at 7.5 MGD per day of treatment capacity. Crooked Creek up here is at 1.9 MGD a day. That's the treatment capacity of that plant. And those are our two conventional treatment plants. We also have three smaller, much smaller package plants. Old Sycamore serves a golf course, Tallwood Estates serves a neighborhood, and then Grassy Branch, which was originally designed to serve schools. And then housing developments were permitted to connect to it, which resulted in overflow going above the capacity of the treatment plant. And so, you may recall we're under a special order of consent with DEQ, and we are in the process of expanding that particular treatment plant to the right size to deal with the flow. In addition, we have two service contracts, one with the City of Monroe for sewer. So you can see this yellow force main going from, the flow would go from east to west. So we're sending flow, essentially I would say uphill to the town of Monroe to treat. The flow wants to go east and north, but we're pushing it through a force main to the town of Monroe for treatment. We also, over here, City of Charlotte has the McAlpine wastewater plant, and so we send flow from the 6 Mile Basin to there. So in a nutshell, that's our system. And again, you can see that we don't serve the entire county. We have service areas as defined. So speaking of service areas, here they are. These are the old 2016 approved service areas. And then 12 Mile, in that basin, we generated about 5.77 MGD of flow a day. Crooked Creek, we're looking at 0.86 MGD a day. These are actual flows. The three package plants, like I said, very small amounts, about 40,000, 20,000 gallons a day. Grassy Branch is orange because of the special order of consent. It sits at 40,000 gallons a day. We, through the Poplin Force Main, send about 1 million gallons of flow from the Poplin Basin, which is up here, through the force main to be treated at 12 Mile. And if you recall, the basin boundary for Catawba and Yadkin goes the edge of 12 Mile, sort of the south part of Crooked Creek follows the 12 Mile basin boundary. And so, as we send water from Catawba over into the Yadkin Basin, we're returning that flow on the sewer side through the Poplin Force Main. And so, to comply with the IBT. And then, Monroe treats about 1.3 MGD a day for us, and Charlotte treats about 1.8. These flow numbers are current as of this year. We're sending a little bit more to Charlotte right now than we have in the past. If you recall, in April 2022, the board approved changes to the sewer service areas. So what you're seeing now are the downsized service areas. Based on the comprehensive plan and everything else that the board adopted, the master plan said we should shrink our service areas to match. And so you can see what they are here. I've overlaid it with the old one, so you can see the areas in blue are no longer in our service area. We're really focused sort of on the west side, and then sort of dealing with this little pocket here on the east side, and then the package plants. But given the development plans for the Lake Twitty and the Lake Lee area, we have no plans to provide sewer service in those areas. You see this regularly. Once a month, we put an agenda item in for information only, which shows you the wastewater flows going through our plants. And so these will be in your Monday agenda packet. And so these are the numbers. So permitted capacity, actual average daily flows, actual plus permitted, and sort of where they sit now. These numbers, these percentages are actually lower than they have been in the past, simply because there has been no rain. So we're in a drought period, so people are using less water. And because of the drought, the 12-month rolling average numbers have been helping us. So by doing nothing different, because we're in a drought, these numbers have been going in our favor. And then we do keep a running list of projects, development projects for both 12 Mile and Crooked Creek. And so you can see those numbers here as well. Again, I mentioned it real quick. but it's worth just spending a minute or two on it. So what you're seeing is the 12-mile facility treatment capacity over time. 2013, it was at 6 MGD. In 2019, we added 1.5 million gallons of capacity to get it up to 7.5. And we're right now in the sort of working out how to get it up to 9 MGD. That particular action is going to come before the board sometime soon. So then that'll happen, hopefully be online by 2026. What you're seeing are two lines here, two dotted lines. And so the top line is a historical max month, and what you're seeing under the gray dots is sort of the average annual daily flow. You can see the trend. Even though there are sort of seasonal and sort of drought-related ups and downs for the total flows, over time, you're seeing the upward trend. And at some point, that 7.5 is going to cross that line, and we're going to be out of capacity. And so the trend says it makes sense to upgrade the facility to 9 to have that additional capacity. I think this might be the last slide under this section. It's just worth showing to you before we move on to the next section, is the FY 23-24 approved CIP. So, this is the CIP that the board approved last year. And so I just wanted to sort of, just as a refresher, show you what's been approved. The Yadkin distribution improvements funded through ARPA, 12 Mile Creek going from 7.5 to 9, has some state funds behind it. Grassy Branch, some water, a little bit in water capital projects, sewer capital projects for FY24 adopted. We have SCADA for both water and sewer this year, and $8.5 million roughly for renewal and replacement this year. So the total CIP for 24 is $63.5 million. If you look at the out years, 25 through 29, the planning years, there is a water capital project planned for 2029, and I think that's the expansion. Is that the expansion of Catawba? I'm sorry, transmission main. But the overwhelming majority of our future capital spending right now is in renewal and replacement. Essentially, it's just maintaining what we have. We're not, other than this transmission main, at this point, we are not planning to make any new additional investment in any of our infrastructure, whether it's water plant capacity, sewer plant capacity, water tanks, pumps, pipes, none of it. We're just essentially maintaining what we have.
And so, just for context, the board recently approved a 3-year rate increase. That was 1.75% rate increase for 24, 25, and 26, I believe. Again, future years are not shown as far as any rates, and also what's not shown is if there are any other projects that the board would want to approve based on our consultant's master plan. So this is just renewal and replacement, and that's all that really covers at this point.
So this doesn't include the hundreds of millions of dollars in all these projects?
That does not. That is correct.
Nothing to do with capacity?
That is correct, yes, sir.
In those cases, it's for approving in as well. Okay, thank you.
So regulatory considerations. So in addition to all of that, we've talked about both of these with the board, but it's worth pointing out that we have some regulatory requirements that we know of. The first is lead and copper, and we are required to inventory all of our water service lines and replace them if they're made of lead. We have over 62,000. We're actually doing on-site our eyeball inspections of about 500 service lines right now just to see what we see. And it's a random sample of systems throughout the county. So we're driving all over the county looking at these 500 lines just to test whether basically a random sample model is effective in telling us whether we have any lead or not. Whether the state will accept that as sufficient, we don't know, but doing that is way cheaper than having to dig up every single service line and set eyes on every single one of those. We won't know truly what the cost of lead and copper is until we actually do the inventory, but so far we have not found a single lead line in our system, so knock on wood that continues. The second is PFAS. We've talked to you about it. There's some class action settlements in place. The thing that I would point out to you is that second bullet. We have been told, and EPA has on their website, that by end of '23, which is like 2 weeks, they will put out in public what their standards are for PFAS. It's on their website. We have heard nothing to indicate that that's actually going to happen. So, but, you know, that's on their website, so I feel comfortable putting it on this slide because they said so. Whenever they do set the standard, we're obviously going to have to work to meet those standards. I will say that our water is safe. It's also tasty. It's good water. We've tested it. We do have low levels of PFAS in it. I will tell you that every utility does, but it is below sort of the standard right now. We test below the threshold of what we know that EPA has already told us. Whether they change those standards or not, we don't know. The 23 master plan. So this will give you an update on sort of where the master planning process. And again, I have for you, Aubrey.
So just as, this is going to be a lot of review, we've presented a lot of this material over the last couple of years to the board, particularly up until the output results. But so I'll go a little bit quicker unless you all have some questions on this material. But the purpose of the master plan is really to help plan for the future. And the major inputs we're taking is what the community is looking for. So we're looking at the comprehensive plans, we're looking at the municipal plans, and really feeding that into determining what the utility needs to do to meet those needs. And the main reason is so that way we can make sure we're building a financial model that'll sustain us for decades to come. So looking at the whole process, it's really to build that roadmap to guide us in the investment decisions that we can make. And looking at the critical success factors for this project, making sure we can plan our cash flow based on the CIP that it gets approved in the final plan, looking to support the capacity needs of the community based on the board-defined service areas that you've already seen, and to balance the extending service to new areas versus the areas that are continuing to grow. Again, we're reaching the end of this project, so this has been a slide that hopefully you've seen several times at this point. Really, the beginning of the project is data collection, and we start modeling. Then we evaluate the gaps between those levels of service that the performance targets that we want to hit, and where we are projecting us to be, coming up with alternatives to that, and then generating the list of projects that are recommended. So all of that work has been completed, and you'll see really a recap of that work, like I mentioned in summary. And then again, looking for direction to really wrap up the master plan document itself with direction from the board on what projects to include. So looking at the growth, this is the 2050 comprehensive plans land use map from the county. Really, again, we're using this as the starting point. You can see the rural residential areas to the south of Monroe and the municipal areas north of Monroe really led to the change in the service areas between the 2016 master plan and this 2023 master plan, and why they were downsized so greatly. And again, when we were at the beginning of the process, we met with all municipalities to get input, make sure we were accounting for their planning as well. I believe you've seen this several times now, so I'll go quickly. These are our current service areas for water, and this is sewer. So when we're looking at the system projections, we need to have a starting point. And so we didn't want to start from where we actually are, but with all the projects that are in construction being completed, so that we're seeing a realistic picture of when we go do capital projects, that we're doing them with the system that we're anticipating to have in the very near future. So, for example, we are planning to have the Yadkin project online when we're doing these the modeling results, so that we're seeing near future results. Things that we are not going to have online are, again, related to projects that are wrapping up. For example, the Highway 75 or 74 booster pump station and the Olive Branch booster pump station, both of those are tied to service from Anson County, so we can boost that water up to serve customers. When we're serving from the Yadkin project, it'll be reversing that flow, and we won't need to boost that water, so those facilities will go offline. Also not in service here is an Indian Trail elevated storage tank. That was previously planned in projects. It's been delayed due to a tie-in with DOT. And so if something wasn't in construction already, we wanted the master plan to regenerate that as a project, to resize it, and just redetermine the need for that project. Similar on the wastewater side, we wanted to make sure that all projects that were in construction, all these projects are either completed or nearing completion right now. and we wanted to make sure that they were all incorporated in the model. Not incorporated because it has not begun design or construction is a new wastewater plant. So again, letting the modeling and our consultant, Brown and Caldwell, determine the need for any future facilities and letting the master plan determine that. One thing we needed to do because of the Yadkin coming online and thinking back to the interbasin transfer and the requirements that go along with that is determining where the new service area boundaries are for each of the water plants. So we want to make sure that we are complying with both of the interbasin transfers. We can't send water from the Rocky River to Catawba, for example. So we want to make sure that during different times of year, we're not transferring too much in one direction. And it's actually quite a lengthy analysis to determine something that works for the system, closing boundaries in the right place, where our customers still have adequate pressure and access to water, but we can make sure that we can operate within these requirements. So you can see the area that is in blue, the darker blue, is expected to switch from the Catawba, being currently served by the Catawba, to be served by the Yadkin in the future. So I'm going to go through performance criteria. These are the same as that were included in the previous master plans, and these were approved by the board earlier in the project. But essentially, when you're getting the water out of the plant into the system to customers, what are we trying to make sure that we're hitting in terms of our targets? So we've got goals shown for all of these criteria. With pressure, we obviously want to make sure that customers have an adequate pressure and that we're keeping them safe by keeping the pressure at a certain level. With fire flow, we want to make sure that we can help with that public safety need, especially depending on the type of land use. Obviously, an industrial facility has a different need than single-family homes. When we're looking at storage, we're looking at providing safety for a fire flow emergency or another kind of system emergency, but we also need to make sure that we have water throughout the day. Our customers use not very much water at night and a lot, at dinner time. So making sure that we kind of balance that water need throughout the day, that's partly what storage does for us. And finally, looking at our pump stations. So we want to make sure we can meet all these needs with the largest pump out of service. So we want to make sure if something's down for maintenance or any kind of pump failure that we can still meet the needs of customers. So I'm going to show you several charts now, several maps. And I'll go a little bit quickly once I get past this first one. I'm going to show you in 5-year snapshots the results from the model. And so starting with pressure, and this is, again, I'm showing you option 1. So it's considering that configuration change for the Yadkin plant. So if you do not see a dot on a water line, it means it's fine. If you're seeing a dot, it's green, it means it's meeting that acceptable level, but it's not really where we want it to be. It's not at the goal level. And then anything yellow, orange, or red is not meeting our expectations. So at the beginning point, you can already see we're having an issue. This is considering on a maximum day. So this is a simulated day. Kind of think of it the worst day of the year, that summer day where everyone goes out and irrigates at the same time. So you can see already having some issues, particularly up in that northern area. It's something that we're going to monitor as we move forward and we get actual data to replace this theoretical modeling data. And if I advance every 5 years out to 2040, you can see where there already are dots, there just gets more orange and red. So what this is really telling us is that the transmission mains and in these certain areas aren't providing enough flow. Essentially, it's a traffic jam in the pipes. So the water is not getting to customers that it needs to. So next I'm going to move to fire flow. It's a slightly different kind of look at the current snapshot. You'll notice a lot of red dots scattered throughout the county. A lot of those are small or dead-end lines. So we typically wouldn't expect them to necessarily be able to provide that fire flow service, but we just wanted to be transparent and show everything and where it's currently at. Where you see the clusters is more of where there's an issue. For example, on that southeast side, that's really because it's a one-way street there. There's one 8-inch pipe. The water has no other way to get there when there's a fire flow, when there's a fire. And so it's just the nature of that system and the configuration down there is that there's going to be inadequate fire flow available. So I'm going to advance again every 5 years. And you'll see more orange and more red. Particularly in the south, the 853 South zone, there's a lot more dots, a lot more orange and red. We previously had identified from actually the 2011 and 2016 master plans to have an additional transmission main and storage tank project down there. They haven't been built yet. And so again, we can see that continued need to upsize transmission capability down there. And last on the distribution side is the storage tanks. So these are the pressure zones shown, and everything in green is good. We've got enough storage now, we've got enough storage out to 2040. So the ones that are the pinkish red is where we have a gap in terms of the projected need for storage. And you can see two different numbers, the current and the future. If you, just for frame of reference, the storage tank on Highway 74 as you come in from Mecklenburg County, or the one on 218 as you come in from Mecklenburg County, those are both 1 million gallon tanks. So for example, in the 853 West zone, we're showing we currently need 2, or 2 MGD, a million gallon tank. And again, that was a previously identified project we wanted to re-justify, and can see we continue to need that. So we've got Chris here for just a hot moment. I'll just hover.
Good evening. Again, my name is Chris Clark. I like to say I'm the new Andy. I've been here, as I mentioned, very short time. Very pleased to meet all of you, be in front of you tonight. One of the things we'll talk about is Yadkin Water Plant. So in 2021, based on the design builder recommendation for the size of the plant, we thought we could start off with a 16-hour-a-day operation. But as we've operated the system and we've gotten used to how the plant's going to work, we do believe it's necessary to move to a 24-hour-a-day operation. We're producing the same amount of water, same volume, but we're doing it over a longer period of time, which will keep everything engaged. In other words, we're not going to have to shut the plant down and keep an efficient operation. So to do that, we'd like to request 4 additional full-time employees, operators to run the shifts efficiently with sufficient manpower at the plant. This will increase not only our shift and schedule flexibility for those who are there, but also safety. No one works alone, basically, and make sure we're staying safe on the plant. And the other is regulatory. NCDEQ requires us to have a licensed operator if we're pumping and making water. Other thing is we're not going to need additional appropriated funds for this position. We'll be able to fund what we have existing in the budget, and we'll have minimal non-staff related costs because we're not producing more water. Same chemical usage, same basic electrical usage. So the only impact is really the staff cost for the additional 4 operators, but that is our recommendation right now. Thank you.
And I want to point out that we put this information so that you have a little context for the agenda item that's coming to you on December the 18th. There is an item for you to consider adding these FTEs. Because of the change in the way we need to operate the plant, we'll need the board to take some action. This is just giving you some context for that.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to move on to the wastewater collection system. So again, this is a combination of gravity mains, lift stations, and force mains. So how do you get the flow from someone's home all the way to the treatment facility? So for gravity sewers, we want to keep that flow in the pipe. We allow it to go up to half the manhole depth, but again, ideal is to keep it in the pipe. With pump stations, it's very similar to the water side. We want to be able to operate and meet the demands with 1 pump out of service. And finally, there's just a note, we always have to choose a rainfall event to simulate for these because rainfall is very important on the wastewater side because it will find its way into the system as much as we try to keep it out to the best of our ability. So this is essentially a storm that we're expecting to happen every year, statistically, 1 time a year. So if you're looking at the current snapshot and all of the infrastructure that's online, and knowing that red is bad, you can see a lot of red to begin with. And I'll just warn you, these maps are not going to change substantially as I go out in time. So the area we predominantly see in red, I don't know if the mouse is showing up in the middle of the East Fork interceptors, what we call that side, is already nearing capacity. We're already seeing issues. This was identified in the previous master plan as a project, but we've seen it advancing in terms of the flows in time. It's materializing much quicker than we expected. So I'm going to show you moving out in time what this looks like. And again, you're not going to see much of a difference. So here's 2030, here's 2035, and 2040. So again, once the water is leaving the pipe, it really doesn't get much worse than that. So what that's showing is, these are already nearing capacity. Sure.
If I can just point something out, and I said it earlier, but I thought it was John's slides, but it was Aubrey's slides. It takes pumps, conveyance, and a treatment in order for a wastewater system to work. This is a good graphical representation. So even if, let's say, 12 Mile was a 50 MGD treatment plant, it wouldn't matter at this point because this red is so congested, we couldn't get flow to that plant, even if we could treat all of it, because it's just backing up. So in order for a wastewater system to work, not only must you have the treatment capacity, you also have to have the conveyance corridor properly sized to get the flow to the plant to be treated. And what this is showing you is that the conveyance corridors aren't sized properly to handle what we project to be the flow. So what you're going to see, and this is something that Brian said, and I didn't think of it until he said it, is that even if we can permit say a new development, let's say a 500 home development at the plant because the capacity exists, if the conveyance corridor can't handle the flow from the 500 neighborhood development, we're not going to be able to permit it. And that's just how the reality is. I don't know if Brian wants to add more to it, if he wants at that point, but I'm going to go sit down now.
Yeah, so that's a good segue there, Hung. So to Hung's point, the master planning process is really important because it looks out for multiple years. We had completed a master planning process in 2016, and the utility was going in the direction of that master plan. And there were a number of projects, there were a number of things that were identified in that plan that were anticipated to address a lot of these issues. And if I'm not mistaken, East Fork was part of that. It was identified at that time that there was going to be issues with that corridor. They've come quicker than anticipated, but it did anticipate that there would be some constraints in the East Fork. And so there were plans in that master plan that would address that. When a board decides to make go a different direction, which is certainly fine, the ship doesn't turn quickly. And so it takes a long time for us to get it in the direction the board wants to go, and it subsequently creates new challenges that we have to face, new things that we have to do differently that we didn't anticipate we would have to do because we were not looking at going in that direction. So I don't want anyone to think that that's red because we didn't know it was coming. We knew it was coming. It came a little quicker than we thought it was, and some of our future plans have changed, so that just creates us where we've got to make a decision on what we do for the future.
So Hung and Brian, if I'm understanding correctly, let me just make sure I understand. What you're saying is if these sewer lines are highways, we put way too many cars on the highways.
Yes, sir.
And the highway can't take the traffic. Am I hearing that correctly?
That's an excellent analogy.
Thank you, sir.
Question, please.
Yes.
That East Fork portion, in the previous plan, that sewage would have gone to the new plant that we targeted.
So the East Fork still drains to 12 Mile, but you can see at the top of it, that star, that's the location of the Poplar Road Force Main discharge.
That's not what I'm saying.
So,
We had a Site B, we bought land for it. My understanding is that flow from that Poplin was going to go to the new site. Therefore, relieving the capacity on those pipes that are now highways overrun with cars or flow.
You are absolutely correct, sir. And so what Aubrey was saying is that is the connection of where that actual force main comes. So all that pump over from Poplin comes from here to here, which adds about 1 million gallons of flow through this entire system. The plan, and that's what I was talking about before, back in 2016, is that you would build a wastewater treatment plant in this area. That flow would then eventually go to that plant. Therefore, you would not be sending 1 million gallons of flow through that pipe into this system here. So it would relieve some of the pressure in this area. You would have 1 million gallons of flow that you weren't pushing in there. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't still development pressure in there. There is, but you would be taking some additional 1 million gallons of flow off of the system. So you're correct. Yes, sir.
But what concerned me is, Hung, you said that there's no plans for any other projects in that area.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Well, I think what I meant was that we couldn't permit new projects, new housing
I
development.
understand, but I'm talking about the capital projects. You said there was not capital projects that we had before. A little over a year ago, we had a project in works, and that was canceled.
What you're
But now
saying
it's
is,
creating this situation here, and if we had to add pipes to that, that would have a major cost to it, right?
yes, sir. What you'll see later on is what our consultant is recommending as far as projects for you to consider that will affect some of these impacts that we're having. So,
Okay.
yes, there were projects that were previously identified. They are not currently in the CIP. The consultant is recommending some projects for you to consider, and we have that in later slides, but you're right, there are projects that would have to be added to the CIP if you choose to add them, and therefore that would change your rate structure. Okay.
So this is the last of the performance criteria work from Brown and Caldwell in the master plan. And so that is what they use to then generate the alternatives and the projects. And so that's what we're going to move into next.
Aubrey, I'm sorry, I want to stop you here one
Sure.
second. So in regard, if you can go back, thank you. So in regards to the area identified in red, this problem was existent long before Site B, correct? So this is something that we identified long before we ventured down that project path, correct?
Yes, sir. We identified that it would be an issue, and we came up with a strategy at that time.
Okay. And is it correct to assume that there could be multiple strategies to mitigate this issue?
I think as far as the strategies to mitigate it are, I wouldn't say multiple. One is you essentially don't approve any more permitting in the area. That way you don't create flow. That's certainly a strategy. Another strategy is that you divert the flow that is coming through there. That was a previous strategy. You take that poplin flow and you send it to another wastewater treatment plant. That's a strategy. But it still requires an upsize of that pipe if you want to continue to flow additional flow through there.
Fair
Does
enough.
that answer your question?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think that, we can look at it several different ways. So, one option would be, no permitting there. And that would be up to the board, obviously, but I want to make this clear, that this board took action against Site B for a number of different reasons, but to be perfectly transparent, one of the biggest reasons is how this was going to be funded. So this is going to be funded on the backs of the ratepayers. And I know that the majority of this board at that point in time thought that it would be very unfair to put the burden of future growth and subsidize that growth on the backs of ratepayers. So although Site B would have been something that possibly could have mitigated this was a problem long before Site B was even discussed.
I think they mentioned 2016 to be exact. I would also like to say that regarding Site B, it is my understanding that before the property on Ridge Road that was purchased very late last year, it's my understanding that this was also presented to Fairview, and they said they didn't want it there. It was presented to Unionville, and they didn't want it in Unionville, and then they found the property on Ridge Road. But, so if we've been working on this for 7 years, I think it's quite unfair to pin this on actions that have happened this year by this board. So I wanted to ask, has the county received $8 million from the state to reimburse the taxpayers of Union County to pay back Union County the $4 million that was spent on Site B? Has the county received the $8 million check?
No, ma'am.
Has the county received discharge permits?
No, ma'am.
Has the county received or completed an environmental study?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. This has nothing to do with what happened last year or with this board.
But the conversations that I had with the water department, yeah, we haven't received those yet, but that work is going on, is what I was explained. Still doing evaluation because Site B was one of the few places that there was water flow sufficient to discharge a waste treatment plant.
But it only became the location when Unionville said they didn't want it and when Fairview said they didn't want it. So this was Plan C.
And I would add something to that. It's my understanding that we didn't know exactly what type of capacity we could even do at Site B because those studies weren't complete. Is that correct?
Oh, certainly. There was no discharge permit issued for that. I do want to clarify, there was only one site identified, Site A, what was previously called. We do have a discharge permit for Site A that was approved by the state. That site is near Unionville and Fairview. It wasn't a question of Fairview, do you want it? Unionville, do you want it? It was near and around those areas. Both jurisdictions were afraid of the development pressures that they would potentially receive, and so they were not interested in that plant being located in and around their area. So there wasn't 3 different sites. It was one site that was identified, Site A. That site then sort of went away when the board said, well, you know, we want to go in a different direction, and then Site B was identified after that.
So Site A has been approved.
It does have a discharge permit, yes, ma'am.
I just want to clarify.
Has Site
Well,
B?
I'm sorry. Speculative
Sorry,
limits.
yeah,
I'm using the wrong terminology. Speculative limits
Right.
is what it has. Speculative limits, not discharge permit, speculative limits, which is what we're trying to get at Site B. We do not have speculative limits at Site B yet.
Okay, so the first location had it.
Yes,
Site B doesn't have it.
correct,
No discharge permits,
correct.
no environmental study.
That's correct.
So we don't, even if we wanted to start tomorrow, how long does it take to build approximately, roughly, a sewer plant?
8 to 10 years.
Okay, but we can't even get started because we don't have,
A speculative limits on that. We do not have speculative limits, so we can't get started.
okay, so again, it is quite unfair to say that because of decisions that have been made about Site B in this past year, the county really doesn't have anything to even get started.
And I certainly don't want the board to think that we are indicating that there were decisions you made. We're only telling you that when decisions are made to do things differently, it takes time to make those changes.
Has the state given you any reason why 13 months later, we do not have the $8 million because we've been doing work, moving forward with the application process? Why has Union County taxpayers not been reimbursed for the land purchase that was made very late last year?
So my understanding is that they are, the consultants who did the analysis for us for those discharge limits or for the speculative limits, they are asking for additional information, and they are challenging some of the information we provided in that they believe that we should have used data for how the stream was previously operating. That means it had actually a beaver dam in it, and that beaver dam was removed. And so they're saying, well, you need to go back and model it as if it had a beaver dam in it. Well, we don't agree with that. We have tried to schedule a meeting, and hopefully we'll have that very soon, where we can sit down with them face-to-face and try to have that conversation of why do they think we should model this differently. and hopefully we can get that resolved and move forward. But that's the crux of it, is they're challenging some of the information we provided in our modeling.
Are
If
we
I may.
actively addressing that?
I'm sorry?
Are we actively addressing
Yes,
that
sir.
challenge?
We actually have asked for them to schedule a meeting where staff can sit down and have that conversation face-to-face, understand why they're asking for that, give our reasons for why we think that's not appropriate, and go from there.
I know there's some questions about sort of the speculative limits and the sort of the process for getting the permits. We actually have a slide later on that will sort of walk you through sort of what that process looks like, so hopefully that'll help. But if it's all right with you, again, just trying to keep an eye on the time, we just want to take you through sort of from the master plan to sort of what are the, how did, the deficiencies that were identified by by Brown and Caldwell, the master planning engineering firm, what do they propose to do to address those deficiencies and address the weaknesses in the system? And so they've generated a list of capital projects that they would suggest that we entertain and look at as potential capital projects. And so with that, I'm going to ask John to come on up and sort of walk you through what Brown and Caldwell generated, what staff did with that list, and sort of where we stand right now.
Good evening, Commissioners. As usual, I'm here to talk about projects. I also get the distinct honor of talking about how much those cost. And at the end, we will go through kind of the permitting timeline and construction timeline for a potential treatment plant at Site B. But to start off with, as we've discussed, the master plan, the output of that really is a capital project listing. The analysis is done, the deficiencies are identified, and the projects are established to address those deficiencies or the weaknesses in the system. Master plan projects are necessarily high level. They say you need a pipe that goes from point A to point B, or you need X gallons of treatment capacity, whatever it may be. But they are high level in nature, not a lot of detail. The cost estimates, therefore, have a wide range to them. And of course, you wouldn't take a project identified in a master plan and just try and go build that. The maps we show you are really the level of detail that we have on these projects at the master plan level. So there's a lot of work to bring it to a point where you could actually hand it off to a contractor and construct something. So with the costs, at the master plan level, we're on the far left of the slide here. So there's a wide variation in those cost estimates because the project is at the concept level, not a definition to it. But as you move through the planning and design process, moving to the right on this graph, that band of uncertainty decreases. So you get a much more focused estimate of what those costs are going to be. One thing to point out here is we do update these budgets every year. So the master plan is done, and then as we get better information, we take those updated cost estimates and we put them into our rate model. So we're back checking ourselves as we're going through time, just to make sure that the plan and the financial model that we built is still sufficient. So here's a lot of stuff on a spreadsheet. We're engineers, we love our spreadsheets. But this is the list of projects that was developed out of the master plan by Brown and Caldwell. And it covers a range of things across water treatment, water transmission, wastewater conveyance, as well as wastewater treatment. The important thing I'd draw your attention to here is at the bottom right of the slide. That total's not a small number. This is over a 15-year period, and the estimated cost is about $650 million. Now, this was the first pass that Brown and Caldwell took at the master plan projects. So staff necessarily review these, and we have some input to them. So we took this and said, okay, well, some of these projects need to go together. Some things weren't considered. Maybe we could do some things a little bit differently. So what we did here is we took that original CIP, took a good hard look at it and right-sized projects, made some corrections to some of the assumptions, aligned everything based on some better information, and at the end of the day, it results in going from $650 million, unfortunately, up to $750 million. And another real driver in the capital plan is these are current day dollars. That's really important to understand. So these projects aren't all executed in year one. That's just not possible. So you're doing this over a 10 or 15-year planning window. In this case, it's a 15-year planning window. So when you apply an escalation factor, because things get more expensive over time, that $750 million translates into just over $1 billion, as you can see in the bullet point on the bottom there. Now, breaking this down for you a little bit, just starting off with water to give you the order of magnitude over this 15-year window, you can see we have a number of transmission projects. Those are listed here in the top rows, about $179.1 million. We have an expansion out at the Catawba plant, and that's coming in at about 109.1. So you've got $288.3 million on the water side. Similarly, on the wastewater side, you're looking at substantial investments in both the conveyance and the treatment systems. So about $115.9 million in conveyance projects and about $543 million in treatment projects for a grand total of right around $659 million. When you add in R&R, looking at the 15-year investment period, just to summarize everything for you, here's the water projects listed, wastewater projects. The R&R projects add about $129 million to the total. Again, breaking it down into treatment, you can see it's roughly 65% of the capital plan is invested in the treatment side and about 40% in the transmission or conveyance systems. It's also important to understand that the capital plan doesn't capture everything, okay? We do our best. It looks at the big picture for the utility, but certain things I want to draw your attention to that it doesn't include are an expansion of the operations center, personnel space, continued operation of the Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant. We looked at the Crooked Creek plant several years ago and identified a number of projects that needed to be executed to keep that plant running, but we did it with the perspective that that plant would be coming offline, because at the time the current plan was that we would have a new wastewater facility and that existing facility would be taken offline. So there's going to be some investment necessary there on the capital side to keep that plant running for the interim future. It also doesn't address anything related to issues that have arisen recently with the Poplin Force Main discharge location and odor control. And it also does not consider future funding for the short water line extension program.
John, who pays for that? Who pays for this capital plan?
Our ratepayers do.
Okay.
Oops, excuse me. So I mentioned escalation is a significant contributor to our capital plan. As you saw, it went from $750 million up to about $1 billion. So about a third of that cost, that present day cost, it increases by a third over time. And this is really why. We don't make these numbers up as far as the escalation factors that we use. We go back to data sources such as the Consumer Price Index or the Construction Cost Index, which is published by Engineering News Record. The E&R Construction Cost Index is more typical to what we do, and that considers labor and material costs across about 20 different major metro areas or regions. So we're much more aligned with that than the CPI. But as you can see here, the 40-year average Consumer Price Index is running about 3%. The Construction Cost Index is running about 3.2%, so it's a little bit higher. We've seen a little bit more separation over the last several years, but FY17 to 19, our inflation factor that we used was 3%. You can see it's right in line with the E&R's Construction Cost Index. And then moving forward, FY20 through 22 and into FY23, we've been using 4.5, which again is closely aligned with what we're seeing as the Construction Cost Index that's published by E&R. So being engineers, we like to show our work. So just took a project here, East Fork Interceptor. In today's costs, or today's dollars, that's estimated to be $47.3 million. When you look at when we're actually going to execute it, so we'd be starting design next year if it were to be approved, and then we would move into construction in FY26. But applying escalation factors to those individual line items, you can see that over time, it does add dollars to the project, almost $4 million in this case, roughly an 8.2% increase. So this is typical across all the projects that you saw on the list. And that's because it's just not physically possible to build everything day one. You can't do it. So Hung said I'd be talking about the projects listed in the spreadsheet. I have good news for you. I am not talking about all of the projects. But I do want to talk on the treatment capacity projects because those do comprise the majority of the capital plan expenditures.
And John, before you do that, again, this is just about showing the board the order of magnitude. This doesn't assume that you will or will not approve all these projects. It's just about seeing it, understanding it. We'll ultimately need direction from you on what we do or don't do, because that's what we build into the finance model to figure out what we do. It's just so you understand the full scope of the entire list.
So starting off on the water side, we have talked about the fact that an expansion at the Catawba plant is predicted to be needed. Brown and Caldwell estimated that our demand was going to be 34 million gallons a day by 2040. So for reference, our current share of that plant is 20 million gallons a day, which means we would need to increase that capacity by 14 million gallons. Now, I'd like to point out that this is one of those projects that staff had a lot of input on when we were going back and looking at the listing of projects. And the reason I say that is because a 14 million gallon a day capacity increment at Catawba just isn't practical. The plant is predicated on a 16 million gallon a day increment. So we would replicate that. Also, this is a 2040 number. So what we proposed was a 16 million gallon a day increment that would be shared between Lancaster and Union County. So it would result in 8 million gallons a day of capacity. So sometime in the future, we would need to look at this and make sure that these demand projections were accurate, and there would be an additional expansion project required somewhere in the future should these demands hold true. Brown and Caldwell developed cost estimates for all of these projects. In this case, like I said, earlier on, these cost estimates are high level, so they're using unit costs. They really don't know much more than the fact that you need X gallons a day of treatment. So in this case, the unit cost for that is $6 per gallon, results in $84 million in a base construction cost. There's a lot of variability in that, so there's some factors built on top of that to account for contingencies. And then you have professional services that are added onto that for both the design and construction administration. This yields your net project cost. In this case, it was $168.5. For reference, after staff looked at this and reworked that project, the cost to Union County would be $98 million for this particular project. And it is important to note that, and Aubrey talked about this, Hung talked about this, but our water and wastewater systems are tied together because of the IBT. You simply can't separate them. So depending on what the board decides to do as an entity on the wastewater side, it's going to necessarily impact what we do on the water side. So if we choose to build a wastewater plant, that could have the effect of alleviating demand on the Catawba plant. If we choose not to build a new wastewater plant on the northeast side of the county, that could have the effect of increasing demand on the Catawba plant. So depending on where we make capacity available, that's where growth is going to be driven. So it's going to stress existing facilities or alleviate stress on existing facilities.
John?
Yes, sir.
You said January 15th, roughly? we can produce water out of the Yadkin?
Yes, that is the date we're anticipating that staff will take over the plant and will begin distributing water to the system.
And we're using a lot of water from the Catawba to supply to people in the Yadkin. That's the IBT.
Yes, sir.
But we can't use the Yadkin because we have, where we're going to get rid of the wastewater, right?
Well, it comes down to a balance issue.
Yeah.
So utilization of Yadkin, if we have the ability to treat wastewater in the Yadkin Basin, then we can utilize the Yadkin water treatment plant to a greater degree. If we're treating wastewater only in the Catawba Basin, then by necessity, we're driving down the utilization of the Yadkin plant because we can't have a situation where we have water going from the Yadkin Basin over into the Catawba Basin as a net return.
Is there a comparison between the costs that we pay in our part of the Catawba compared to what it's going to cost in Yadkin to produce water? I mean, like 6 Mile is considerably higher, going to Charlotte.
Certainly, I understand. I can't unfortunately answer that question because the plant's not in operation. We don't have any data.
You're not
to
sure what
draw
it's going to
off
cost?
Of the per gallon cost. I understand what you're driving at, but I don't have the information.
Because we could free up, roughly 5 million gallons of water from the Catawba?
Well, you're still going to serve some portion of the Yadkin or the Rocky River subbasin with Catawba water, and that's going to have to be managed over time. Regardless of what
You might
we
be
do,
able to use a lot less than 5 million gallons, but what John is saying is that we will still have to send some water over there. The way our system is designed, we will always send some water from Catawba into the Yadkin, but it could be likely a lot less than 5 million gallons.
Thank you. Okay, so this is what I was referring to when I went through the cost buildup for the Catawba project, just picking this discussion back up. Again, we're engineers, we like to show our work, so showing this moving out in time, you can see that base cost of about $96.3 million. When we actually execute the project, those costs get escalated over time at that 4.5% rate. Net result on this project is a 13.3% increase. That's largely driven by the fact that you're moving those construction dollars out, the larger sum of money, further out in time. Oops. So want to touch on the wastewater treatment improvements that are recommended out of the capital plan. So recommended capital improvements are 3 package plants. No improvements are recommended for any of those plants beyond what we're doing with Grassy Branch and the special order of consent, which we've already talked about. Our agreement with Monroe, the east side, there's no additional improvements scheduled there. We're simply managing our treatment contract with the city of Monroe. Same with 6 Mile, no improvements, just managing that contract with city of Charlotte. We do have the Site B wastewater plant that is recommended out of the master plan, and moving forward further out in time with an expansion to the 12 Mile plant, moving it from 9 MGD up to the 12 MGD increment. So again, it's important to understand that should Site B move forward, there's likely going to be less pressure on the 12 Mile plant, as we've already discussed, because Poplar Road would be conveying its flows to a new plant, so you'd be relieving about 1 million gallons of capacity off of that plant. So the timing of that expansion for the 12 Mile facility is really highly variable. Oops. So just walking through the new water reclamation facility at Site B. It's estimated to be a 6 million gallon a day plant. This results in just over 4 million gallons of capacity increase, or treatment capacity increase in the system. It would divert Crooked Creek and Poplar Basin flows to that new facility. Like I said, it could have the impact of delaying expansions out at the 12-mile plant, and it would likely reduce the demands on the Catawba plant as well, while increasing the utilization of the Yadkin facility. We would also be able to take the Fieldstone pump station offline, and it would allow us to execute another capital project without having any concerns about system capacity at the Poplin facility. Additionally, we do already have property for Site B, so that's something that we would not have to contend with in the project process. Going through the cost estimate, same buildup. So there's a treatment increment, there's a unit cost, a number of other items you can read through there as far as the remaining modifications that would need to be made. When you factor in the uncertainties in construction and scope and the professional services, you come out with a cost that's about $229 million. Again, this was a project that staff looked at very hard, and unfortunately, the net result on this one was an increase. So one of the big drivers for that was, at the time this estimate was developed, shortly thereafter, there were a number of projects bid, and that unit cost went from $16 a gallon up to $20. So it represented about a 25% increase in the unit cost. Propagating that through, if you were to go back and look at the staff comparison slide, you'd see the net project cost for this project resulted or netted out at about $303 million. So it was about a $75 million increase. And that's just due to market conditions. So looking at how this project was looked at in the master plan, you know, there's some benefits to this. You gain capacity in the system, allows you to better utilize and manage that IBT. A number of things I've talked about here already. One of the drawbacks of the new wastewater facility is there's a lot in it. So it's not only the facility, but there's the conveyance to get wastewater to the facility. There's the decommissioning of the Crooked Creek facility, modifications to Poplin, and decommissioning of the Fieldstone pump station. All of these things have to happen, and they're going to have to happen in a certain sequence. So you're not going to be able to control. You don't control when those things happen. It's like a series of dominoes. One has to happen after the other. You can't move stuff around and do it in a different order. So that's going to tie our hands a little bit, and that's what that drawback is trying to convey. So talking about the time frame for a new wastewater facility, and this goes back to the discussion the board was having earlier. So if you focus your attention on the red block in the second row, that's the spec limits. That's where we are right now with Site B, okay, just as a starting point. The green bars, the top one is really a summary of environmental permitting, and then the second row underneath that breaks that down into its various components. So you've got your environmental assessments or impact statements, the finding of no significant impact or FONSI, and then your discharge permit, NPDES. Once you get to the end of that environmental permitting, then you see the two blocks that note construction permitting, and that's your approval to construct and building permits. So what this is representing is the shortest possible duration of a wastewater facility to be built. What it's telling me, or what it's trying to convey here, is that you've got about a five-year timeline to get to a point where you have a building permit. You then have to put the project out to bid and construct it. So that's why we talk about this project in terms of anywhere from an 8 to 10 year time frame, because you have to go through this permitting process, you have to have time to construct it. This is the quickest you can possibly get it done. Now, there are ways that this project timeline can be extended, because the bottom row shows you items such as piloting of technology and then your design work. That design work's got to be done before you can apply for your building permits. So we're showing this as the shortest possible timeline, because that that design work is done right in time with right aligned with the NPDES permit being issued, so you can go forward and submit for your building permits. Now, if that design work is deferred, if you start it later, then you're going to start growing a gap between the NPDES block and that ATC and building permit application period. So the timeline can stretch out, but you can't make it any shorter. Okay? Yes?
I have a question while we're looking at this construction timeline. Site B is currently under contract, or I believe that contract was going to go through 2032, 2033.
It was just shy of 10 years.
So how can we begin construction on that, on Site B?
No, he's just showing you a typical timeline. That doesn't mean that you will or won't do it. That's just a typical timeline for how you could actually build a project. Obviously, the board, if so inclined, would have to make a decision that you would approach that property owner about a change in the lease. That would be a board decision. We're just showing you a timeline. If you started it, this is how long a normal process takes.
I mean, if I had a commercial business on that property with a 10-year agreement, I would be extremely concerned if I was looking at this presentation tonight and it shows that the county would like to begin construction in 2027 in violation of our current agreement.
Again, this is just showing the board what it would take if you actually started the process without any kind of constraints. It's not inferring that you will or will not do that. It's just giving you an information about how the process works, how long it would take.
I mean, in all fairness, the entire presentation tonight has been presented with no other option than to do what's on this timeline at Site B. But, I mean, if that's the case, then I would add a footnote to this page that this is an imaginary example of a timeline. But if I had a signed agreement with the county, I would be very offended by this presentation tonight. You know, and beginning construction on that land in 2027 would be very alarming to me if I was running my family business there.
Certainly.
So you know, either put a footnote that this is a what if,
Sure.
or just change out these years to like 2033. That would be a good alternative for me.
Certainly.
John, can I ask you a question? We finished the last upgrade to 12 Mile in 2019, wasn't it?
Yes, November 2019, the expansion to 7.5 was completed.
And it was targeted to last till 2030?
It was further out in the timeline that we expected to have to expand again. Honestly, I don't recall the exact year it was programmed
Well, I
for.
remember it because when we just made the discussion to go to the next 1.5 million, questions, how long is that going to last us? Because our county is very attractive. We've got a lot of people moving. There's a lot of building permits available that hadn't broke ground yet. So if we don't think about the future, we're going to die on the vine.
I would say too that we have to think about more than just residential, that we have to think about other aspects of building in our county. And right now, as I understand it, we are extremely heavy residential and upwards of around 90% residential. So, you know, this is what we're seeing tonight. I believe everyone should understand that due to the permitting process that you're more than likely to see more and more residential with these, at least the sewer projects, or if a sewer plant is considered, simply because residential gets through the permitting process so much quicker than those other forms of construction, such as commercial or industrial, or for that matter, even retail probably. And as I understand it too, and Mr. Matthews, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we cannot hold back and reserve sewer capacity for commercial projects or any type of project for that matter, because that is looked at as discriminatory And there's certain legalities there in place that we cannot infringe upon.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, last slide for me. So just going back to that permitting process, I wanted to make sure that we conveyed, we have large blocks on that previous slide, but really wanted to break that apart and demonstrate just how complicated this process is. So again, we're on the far right of the slide at the speculative limits request. There is an awful lot of work that has to go in to get you to the point where you have an NPDES discharge permit and can move forward with requesting that authorization to construct from the state. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Hung.
Thank you, John. So the master plan, Brown and Caldwell, when they put the master plan projects together, when they did it, since then, time's passed. We're a year and a half since that point. Well, things happen, and the one thing that they look at is sort of what is needed to keep the system going. They're looking at plants, pipes, pumps, those things. There are other capital projects that are not included on the list that Brown and Caldwell initially developed that we think need some consideration or at least some direction from the board and want to at least bring to your attention. The first of those is the Operations Center expansion to house all Union County water staff. We're located in two places. There's about 100 staff out at the Operations Center, basically doing the field work there, taking care of the hydrants, they're maintaining the equipment, they're out at the plants, they're basically out in the field doing stuff. We have about 75 employees in this building, all of 4, half of 5, all of 6 that are doing utility work, everything from engineering to new development to customer service to taking new applications, all those things. It would be beneficial to the utility to be located in one place. And we've identified that as the Operations Center. Secondly, and Crooked Creek, I'll talk about it a little bit, Poplar Enforcement Short Line. The reason why I just want to move on is it's easier with pictures. This is the Operations Center. It's off Gold Mine Road. This is the admin building. This is where the staff is housed. We keep pretty much all of our field equipment there. The vehicles are housed in the garage. All of our equipment, pipes, other things are stored in the warehouse, in the shops. This is where we maintain our equipment. We have lay-down yards to put stuff down that we need to move around. Our trucks, our lawnmowers, everything is sort of maintained out at this facility. There's enough space out here that if we built it properly, we could move all of us out of this building and co-locate us in one place. And this location, it wouldn't be just the Operations Center, it'd be Union County Water's global headquarters. This is where we would be stationed out of. I was hoping to get a laugh with that, but no, you guys are not laughing right now. But that's all right.
I want to point out that the reason this is here is because it's part of a bigger picture. We have space needs that are driving what we do in the government facility. Our judicial center, they are needing additional space. First off, we have 18 new public defenders that were part of the budget. We didn't ask for that. That came in the budget. So we'll have to account for those individuals. The judges, we're potentially going to add a new judge. We need new courtroom space. All of that equals space that we don't have in the judicial center. The only way to accommodate that, or the easiest way, is to put those facilities here in this building, which means we then have to find space for the individuals that we relocate out of this building. So you're seeing this because the easiest way to make that happen is to expand the operations center, move all of the Union County water and folks out of this building, which frees up space in this building to accommodate for judicial. So it's a larger discussion. They're showing you this because it fits into that discussion.
And the second thing that I want to just make you aware of is in the previous master plan, it was intended that Crooked Creek would be decommissioned as a wastewater treatment plant. It's frankly, it's old. It's hard to find parts for the equipment. we've often had to, sort of custom make the parts to keep this facility running. That's how old it is. It's also landlocked. There are residential neighborhoods on two sides. There is a commercial, structure on the other side, and then, there's no way to expand this facility. Even if you could expand the footprint, expand the treatment capacity, it is highly unlikely that the state would allow us to amend the discharge permits because of the location of the stream and the discharge. In the previous master plan, the upgrades were intended for, and John said this already, for the electrical equipment, some of the process trains, just to keep the place running until a new facility could be built. And then this would be decommissioned. We did not intend to keep this place running at minimum for another 10 years. We need to go back and look at this facility because there's going to be more work needed to be done. Two things. One, this little building here is the totality of the administrative office space for this facility, and it is inadequate and insufficient. We need to look at more space for the staff that are working out of here. To give you a sense of it, we actually put two staff people in storage closets, not big storage closets, no bigger than sort of that square footprint. If you took that desk and did it, doubled it, that was about the size of it. And it used to be where we would house the chemicals, move the chemicals out, turned it into it, put a desk in there, told the operator, this is now your office. It used to be where we stored the chlorine for the I think we stored chlorine or chemicals in there. We need more office space. The second is we need to go back and look at the actual physical infrastructure of the plant, beyond the electrical stuff and the process train, just simply looking at the concrete and sort of, what condition it's in, looking at the entire footprint, all the equipment, and seeing what we need to do and what investments we need to make to keep it going for at least 10 years, maybe longer, depending on whatever direction the board wants to give us. The third thing that I want to talk about real quick is, again, this is not on any master plan work that Brown and Caldwell did. It's not on any work that we've done, but we have become aware that the Poplin force main discharge, it takes the flow from the Poplin Basin right here. It flows by gravity to this point. This force main takes 1 million gallons a day of wastewater flow and discharges it right here at the Poplin force main discharge. Obviously, that's a map, and so if you look at the end of this discharge on this map, it is the way since we were here first, the force main was here first, then a neighborhood got developed on top of that particular location. The way they designed the neighborhood, the force main runs right down Carling Creek Drive, and it discharges right here into the gravity sewer. So when you have, if you can, I'm going to use something picturesque here. So if you've ever been to a North Carolina waterfall, you know how pretty they are. But you also know that when the water comes over the edge, there's a lot of turbulence, there's a lot of mist, a lot of spray. Now imagine 1 million gallons of wastewater doing exactly the same thing. There is mist, there is spray, there is gas. And so what we've learned, and the homeowners in that neighborhood have made sure that we knew, is that there's an odor issue emanating from the Poplin force main discharge. And again, this is the Poplin force main running right down the middle of the road. Here's a manhole for the Poplin force main. So if you opened up that manhole, looked inside, you would see it. We actually, being made aware of it, not having any alternatives at the time, we actually commissioned a study with an engineering firm. Hey, take a look at it. Tell us what we can do. What are our options here in dealing with the odor, with the discharge? So they looked at 3 things, and I'm going to take you to the column on the left. Treatment options. They said, well, really, you can do 3 things. You can deal with it at the manhole and treat the vapor, the gas that's emanating from the force main. You can do some sort of treatment upstream from the discharge. So we'd follow it all the way back to the force main. We'd probably follow it even further back, I think, to one of the pump stations. And you could treat it upstream so that by the time it gets to the bottom of the force main, a chemical reaction has taken place to dampen or reduce the odor. The third thing you can do, just move it. Move the force main. It's located under the road. You can extend it, you can dig it, you can just basically put a new force main in, sort of route it somewhere else where there aren't people. And that way, you're not dealing with the odor. Odor's still going to be there, but there just won't be people there to smell it. So it's like, okay, those are really your three options. They said, to the system, they looked at two things. Black and Beach, right? Black and Beach did the work for us. They said, from a system standpoint, the vapor treatment doesn't help the system at all. It just deals with the odor in a localized place, whether it's one manhole, two or three, it's really just benefiting right there. There's no system benefit. One of the things we also look at is, there's some corrosion effects as well. And treating the vapor doesn't help you manage the corrosion that comes from all the gases and, sort of working its way. The liquid upstream treatment, the odor reduction is high to the system. There's benefit to the system as a whole. It also benefits you on the corrosion side, so they're a medium and high. So there's, the liquid upstream treatment is probably a good option. Relocating the discharge, it doesn't benefit the system because it's not changing anything. It's just changing the discharge location. So there's really you're not reducing the odor, you're just moving it away from people. The odor's still going to be there. If in the future another development gets built nearby, you're going to have the same problem. In terms of the corrosion reduction or benefits, none, because you're not dealing with the problem, you're just moving it somewhere else where there aren't people. At the manhole, the vapor treatment probably is high value in terms of odor reduction. It's probably a big benefit. Nothing on the corrosion side. Liquid upstream treatment, pretty much the same thing. Medium benefit at the manhole, so benefit to the neighborhood. Again, same thing on the corrosion high. Relocating the discharge probably has medium benefit to the odor reduction, depending on sort of where you relocated, sort of what you put in place in terms of venting and fans. In terms of corrosion reduction, relocating the discharge at the manhole, there's high benefit at that particular location. In terms of investment, and I put a little chart down there at the bottom, the vapor treatment, you're probably talking about tens of thousands of dollars in terms of the capital cost to sort of put in these filters inside as many manholes as we think necessary. They'd have to be maintained every 6 months or annually. We'd have to have staff go out there and change the filters. They're not cheap, but it would be the cheapest option. We could also put in a misting system. That's what they looked at. But again, that has capital costs in that we'd actually need electricity, and we'd have to have a constant mist spraying into that manhole to create ozone to deal with the odor. Liquid upstream treatment, again, it's a chemical reaction. Capital investment is probably low. There is an annual cost because you're going to constantly need chemicals to add into the wastewater stream to generate the chemical reaction to reduce the odor, downstream, 7 or 8 miles downstream. In terms of relocating the discharge, the capital cost is going to be high because you're basically digging it up, and putting a new one in place. The annual cost is low. It's just whatever the regular maintenance that we would be doing anyway on the force main. But just investing in it, removing that, if you can imagine taking a force main that's under a road and extending it, you're going to have to dig up that road. If you go upstream on the force main and go around the backside of the neighborhood, again, you're digging stuff up and you're putting new pipe in the ground. Vapor treatment is probably tens of thousands. Some sort of liquid treatment system upstream, probably hundreds of thousands. And if you're talking about relocating the force main, you're probably talking several $1 million. And I realize those are very sort of big bucket order of magnitude kind of numbers. Further on down the slide, one of the actions that Brian has asked us to do is come back in January to the board with better defined options and some pictures of what this might look like depending on the option. And so we're preparing to do that, I think, for the second meeting in January, is to give you some more details about what does a vapor treatment system look like, what's involved, what exactly is the cost, how often are the filters changed, to provide you all that detail. Exactly how would you relocate the force main? Where would it go? What would the end of it look like? What kind of venting system would you need in order to make it work? And so to bring all that back to you.
So this has been very helpful because we have gotten a lot of complaints and a lot of public comments. So the consultant part, as far as getting information back, is complete.
Well, they are finalizing their report.
They're
So we
fi-
haven't
okay.
we have not gotten the final report yet. So they gave us a draft. We gave them a ton of feedback saying, you know, you need to give us more definition, give us more detail on some of these options. And we had some questions for them. So they've gone back to do exactly that, provide more detail, and they'll deliver us a final report sometime in January, I think.
And then the staff will then take that and also generate some of these more specific cost estimates for these alternatives.
So in preparation for our January discussion or whatever, when you bring this back, I just recall that there being a lot of question, was this an issue that was a result of the developer, or the developer not following the advice that was given, and now we have this issue? And because it's on our discussion tonight, are we saying that we've inherited
No,
this
ma'am.
problem where we're looking at our capital and trying to figure out, are we going to pay for this? So, we don't have to have that discussion tonight, but I remember a lot of details when those complaints came in and advice from staff not being followed.
Yes.
So I'm concerned about Union County taxpayers having to pay for this mistake.
Certainly, and again, the January timeframe is where we're going to look for the board to give us some direction on, do you want to give us direction to do some of these items or none of these items? And what does that look like? And then how do we build that into our model for our CIP? Understand, we do, yes, certainly agree that we made the developer aware of our concerns, and they move forward with this project, even though we made them aware of our concerns. There would be an odor issue that they'd have to deal with. So we're not assuming that we will do any of these items. These are things that we can do, or we can do none of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the last section of sort of other capital projects that Brown and Caldwell did not look at was the short water line program. And so I'm just sort of, and I've been asked enough, and our staff have been asked enough, I just wanted to give you an update on the entire program, sort of where it stands. It's a couple of boxes. FY21, there are 3 phases, A, B, and C, and you can sort of see where they stand. Phase A is already in construction. B and C are out to bid, and we expect to be done with those projects December 24, February 25, and March 25. And you can see what the estimated costs are below. The 2022 short line program, 4 phases in that, and right now all 4 of them are in the design phase. So we're sort of drawing up the plans of what those water line extensions would look like. We think they would be done sometime between April and September 2025, and you can see what the estimated cost is for each of those phases below. In 23, for the FY23 program, we completed the cost share agreements November 2023, so not too long ago. Next step for us is to bring back before the board, probably in February, and get your approval on the final list of projects for that 2023 short line program. We think it'll cost about $3.3 million to do it all. We think that will be done by September 2026. With that is pretty much where the short line program ends, in the sense that there is no funding identified or slotted or authorized for FY24 going forward. Obviously, the board can decide to fund it going forward, and we're happy to do it. But it's just at this current time, the funding only goes through 2023. So that takes us, believe it or not, we are near the end. We're almost done, just a couple of more slides. So we're going to talk about, so now that we've showed you sort of the master plan, the background of what the projects are, sort of real quick on how we fund it, and I think, Amy McCaskill is going to talk about that.
Thanks, Hung. I cringe a little bit every time they call the Crooked Creek facility old, because it was commissioned the year I graduated from high school. But Thank you for the opportunity to meet with us tonight. We appreciate that. This is the first opportunity I've had to speak with you all in this format, so be gentle. Let's talk a little bit about how we get from the master plan to the rate model. As you can see, the master plan process, we have our consultants that run the hydraulic models. They identify system efficiencies. They come up with a list of capital projects. Next, they give us these project high-level cost estimates, as John and Aubrey talked about. And then we work as a staff to schedule them, adjust for inflation, that kind of thing. So we're at this next phase right here where the rate model is developed for affordability. We will, whatever the board direction gives us on capital projects, we will put those projects and those costs and that time frame into our rate model, along with all of our operating costs. And we will be able to come back to you to help you understand what kind of rate scenario we're looking at and the impacts of that to our ratepayers. This is a snapshot of the most recent dashboard of our rate model. This was used to determine the 1.75% rate increases that you approved from FY24 through FY26. This was for the cash CIP and the 12-mile expansion to 9 MGD. As you can see, it includes the one-time depreciation use of $20 million from fund balance. And you can see that all of our debt covenants are being met. As you know, tax dollars are not used at all in the funding of any aspect of the utility. We're an enterprise fund. Rates and fees pay for all of our expenses, personnel, capital, operating, and debt service. Any revenues over expenses are transferred to our capital fund to use to help cash fund projects. Another way that we can use to offset some of the cost of capital projects are system development fees. System development fees are governed by state statute. We appropriate them only after we collect the funds. We do not budget for them because we don't know how much we're going to get every year. They are paid by the builder at time of building permit, and that is cyclical. Our fees are based on a study that must be conducted every 5 years as part of state statute. If you'll remember, back in June, we presented to you our system development fee study, and you all instructed us to move forward with the rates for the coming year. We have a water system development fee of $1,678 and a sewer fee of $6,412. You can see on the slide the previous rates. They're pretty much the same. It's just now the split between water and sewer, and that is because of the capital that was in the capital plan that we gave them as they did the study. We have to do a new study every 5 years, but we can do one anytime. So if the board gives us direction on a significant change in our capital plan, we would want to redo that study because it could make a change in our system development fees that could be used to help offset the cost of those projects.
Amy?
Yes, sir.
Question. So should we decide to do some sort of capital project, that project could have an impact on future system development fees too, correct?
That's correct.
The depreciation of that project, if I recall correctly, is part of that formula that is governed by state statute.
Yes, there's a very specific formula that also takes into account how much of the asset that we still owe money for.
Okay, so if we entered into like debt service for a project, then technically speaking, then our system development fees may take a hit the next time they're assessed.
They could, but as the project, as the loan, as we pay off the loan, we will get some of that value back.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Sure.
So Hung was kind of making you feel like there were no more slides. That's not really true.
I said a few left.
The next discussion topic is really giving you an update and a highlight of the sewer allocation methodology. And then from there, we'll get into the discussion of giving us a little more direction. But Aubrey is going to talk about the methodology for sewer allocation policy. This could be a good stopping point if you want to take a break. Obviously, there's a little bit more to go, but if the board needs to take a break, this is probably a good break point if you need to.
Y'all want to keep going, you want to take a break?
Keep going.
Going? All right, very good.
All right, so I do promise, this is the last topic. So we were directed, staff were directed by the board to evaluate different strategies to look at allocating future wastewater treatment plant expansions. And this is really driven by the 12 Mile Creek expansion, the additional 1.5 MGD capacity that is, design is complete or completing, and we're getting ready to go for bid. So it's essentially at that point, and the board directed us to come back before going out for construction. So here we are. So we've been working closely with the manager's office, and really, the intent is to help plan for these facilities, the timing in the future, and how we'll be funded, make sure that we're financially prepared. So I'm just going to kind of give a quick overview of the way that we're considering this. So we'll start with the amount of the new treatment capacity. So in this case, it's 1.5 million gallons per day with 12 Mile expansion, but it really could be applied and would be applied to any future wastewater treatment plant expansion. We would deduct from that a utility contingency reserve of 10%. And this is just to make sure that we're not over allocating a facility, that we're accounting for inflow and infiltration and not maxing out any facilities. And so that there would be some remainder, that 90% that's available to allocate to municipalities and to the county as well. So we looked at several different options, and I'm really only going to focus on the recommended methodology here, which is looking at the development potential, which is under undeveloped and underdeveloped areas. So, and you can see over on the map on the right, when we're talking about 12 Mile, it can get a little confusing, but after all the maps you've seen tonight, hopefully it's clearer, but 12 Mile wastewater reclamation facility upgrades will impact the Poplin service area as well, because it pumps and is treated by 12 Mile. So additional capacity of the 12 Mile wastewater plant could allow for more permitting up in the Poplin Basin area. So like I mentioned, we looked at several different options and really focused on this. And the main differentiators and why it stands out is that it looks at the recent history in terms of development in different areas, and also projections. So it's a balance of both rather than just one or the other. And it considers the development potential of land. And this was, we mentioned using CARTPO data. This was heavily involving the planning department with the county. So really they did all of the math here. And if I misspeak, it's because I don't usually talk about these data sets. And hopefully we can get you more information if you have any very, very detailed questions that I cannot answer. But so we worked heavily with planning to come up with this. And again, this data, the CARTPO data, is contributed to by all of the municipalities. The county all have an opportunity to weigh in on this data. So it's a third-party, trusted, agreed-upon data set. And just as a note, we're constantly updating this every, I think it's 4 to 5 years. They go through the update process, and we're actually in the middle of that update process right now. So we're expecting the updated numbers early to mid next year. So just as a note on that, we would actually recommend, while I'll show you the results of this methodology now, we're hoping that you would want to wait for those final numbers. Otherwise, we're really basing it on 5-year-old data. So again, if we're expanding 12 Mile by 1.5 million gallons per day, and we're withholding that 0.15 for the utility, so we're going to be allocating 1.35. So just as an example, all of the municipalities as well as Union County that are a part of either the 12 Mile collection area or the Poplin Road area. So now I'm going to show you, without too many numbers, what that meant, what the methodology itself actually is factoring in. So it's looking at the residential development permits from the recent past, the last 5 years, in terms of what has actually been getting built, where has the demand been going, as well as that development share anticipated in the 2050 CARPO numbers. Again, from that, I think 2018 is the most recent data available. Apologies. So averaging those together to come up with a residential development attraction kind of factor, and then balancing that with available, the capacity that the residential capacity that is available for that space. And then on the non-residential side, doing something similar, looking at, so for residential, we're talking about dwellings. On the non-residential side, we're looking at jobs. So again, averaging the development share of jobs that would go to that particular area with the capacity. So then when you average it all together, you get the utilities allocation. So for each of I've got these all listed alphabetically here. You can see if the percent is 0, it's because they don't have any, they're not located within that basin. So for example, Hemby Bridge is located in Poplar, but does not have any geographic area within the 12-mile collection area. So you can see with each 12-mile and Poplar, you can see how they add up to 100. So you can see who gets the share, with Union County, of course, being the unincorporated areas of the county. So this is as percents. So next, how does that equate to gallons? So roughly 25% of the allocation is in the Poplin Road Basin, and the remaining 75% is in the 12-mile basin. So all of those numbers, when you're looking at the 1.35 million gallons per day, you can see where they shake out here. Just as a note, it was agreed upon that all the municipalities would get a minimum of 1%, so that's the 13,500 allocation, just in case they had less, or for example, like with Lake Park, mostly built out, but just in case there's, they have enough to do a small project or one small permit. And again, we mentioned there'll be an update to the CARPO data in the next several months, and we would ideally refresh this with that revised data set. So these numbers would shift slightly, but we would be using the most recent data. There's also a note, as we've talked several times today, there's the multiple locations throughout the system that can affect permitting. And so if the bottleneck is in the collection system rather than the treatment plant, for example, for Poplin, there's possibly we would have to stop permitting in the future at the Poplin Road area. And if that was the case, we could look at the policy. We're still drafting that with legal, but we would either come back to the board, or we could have some allowance for permitting stops in that area that we would reallocate that capacity to the 12-mile area. But that's a decision for the board and how you'd like to move forward.
Right. So, what we have here really is first off, methodology, and we used residential development potential and job development potential as really how we came up with the percentages, which then yields whatever that gallon might be based on the data today, as well as what may come out in mid 2024. Ultimately, I think that Jason and legal staff would want to talk to you in a closed session about some of the legal issues with this. We certainly don't want to get into that in open session, but as far as a methodology is concerned, we think that this is the cleanest and the best path for methodology, because you're taking into consideration both residential and job creation as far as the methodology goes. What we would ask the board tonight, obviously this isn't something for you to approve. It's really obviously to give us the go-ahead to say, yes, you're okay with the methodology. You don't have any concerns with the methodology, understanding that the legal department will want to sit down and talk to you more about some of the risks associated with it. But we're at the point where we can move forward with bidding on 12 Mile Creek, and we're on hold until the board gives us some direction. The longer we continue to wait, the more the cost will go up on that project. We would ask that the board consider giving us authorization to go out to bid for the 12 Mile Creek plant. Obviously, the contract would then have to come back to the board, and you'd have to approve that contract. But that would give us the ability to be moving forward while we're finalizing the actual policy and having it adopted by the board. So as a matter of at least some decision point, I'd ask the board to consider giving us the ability to go out for bid for that project. Any questions about the methodology or anything related to the request to at least go out to bid?
Regarding the methodology and needing to have closed session with legal, I recommend that we just wait and get that information from legal before we discuss methodology. I would hate to make any decisions without general counsel.
So you would not recommend going out to bid on the project? That's what I'm asking at this point too, that you would not recommend?
Well, it sounded like three different or two different parts.
Well, yeah, so if you do have some concerns about methodology, that's certainly fine. But I am asking, is the board willing to allow us to go out to bid as well?
Yes, I heard that.
Okay.
I was just acknowledging your comments about methodology and that we would hear from legal.
I'll say that I appreciate staff bringing forward this allocation policy. I think that this is something that has probably been needed for quite some time, and so we can get into the particulars at a later point, but just general thoughts here. I do like the fact that we are looking at an allocation policy.
I like the general sketch of this allocation policy. Indeed, I'm the one that brought this idea to the board when I talked with the outgoing director of Raleigh Water and figured out just how Raleigh's doing it. And it's basically what's kind of sketched out here. Raleigh Water allocates water and sewer for municipalities throughout Wake County. And I think this is a good way to go. The only thing I would kind of add or suggest is that the allocations not just be granted to the municipalities, but that, that at least in some measure, the municipalities help pay for it. And whether that's maybe some sort of rate differential, or whether it's a lump sum amount, I do think it would be appropriate for towns to put some skin in the game, so to speak, and help pay for some of this allocation. But I like it. I like the general sketch of this allocation policy.
So, Brian, point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
What do you need from us then tonight regarding this? Do you need a formal vote?
So I'm certainly not recommending that the board take any kind of action on the methodology or the policy itself, but I am asking if the board would be willing to take a vote on directing us to go out to bid for the 12 Mile Creek project.
You gonna make a motion, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we direct staff to begin the bid phase on the 12 Mile Creek expansion from 7.5 to 9 million gallons per day.
All right, the motion's been made. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. So we're at the point now where we need to sort of get a little bit more direction on the board as far as the issues related to our capital for our plan. As Amy pointed out, there's a lot of work that goes into letting you know what the impacts are for our rates, depending on what the board decides to do or not do. And you have certainly options. You can do nothing. You can do some of it, and you can do all of it. And we're not insinuating you should do any or all of it. I would certainly recommend you not do nothing. I think that is certainly a challenge for the system, but you can. You can do none of it, some of it, or all of it. Ultimately, what it boils down to is the projects are broken up, and we tried to show you, can you flip it back to we tried to show you if you have a system, not a capacity change, but where you're actually doing something with the efficiency of the system. Well, you've got that as an item for water. Then you do have capacity for water if you wanted to do something with that. Same thing with sewer. We have items that handle the system itself for sewer, and then you have capacity for sewer. Let's talk about the water. Obviously, what you saw is that if we do nothing with the water system, we will have some challenges with meeting our goals as well as providing adequate pressure for our residents by 2040. We are currently facing some issues with pressure in certain areas that will just only continue to grow if we don't make some decisions. Part of that is related to water tanks. We need some additional water tank storage that helps with pressure. And then we also have some water main parallels and some other items that we need to do if the board chooses to assist with the pressure / fire flow issues. And Brown and Caldwell has listed those projects here, and those total at this point in time $179 million, almost $180 million for those projects. What's also identified is that there is an upcoming need for an expansion to the Catawba River plant, the water plant. That's driven in part by our need as well as Lancaster's need, because we are a partner with Lancaster. I will say in the past, they have been a very good partner in that when we needed to expand, they were willing to go with us and make that expansion. Their need for expansion may actually outweigh our need at this point in time, but we do show that we will have additional water needs in the Catawba. So you see what we're showing here is an expansion of that Catawba plant within that time frame, within the capital plan, and that's roughly about $109 million. You put those all two together, that's $288,262,000 for water. I want to open it up and have anyone have any questions about that and what we've presented, any additional information you may need. What are your thoughts on the water side of it?
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Matthews. Brian, can you comment, have we had any kind of discussions, obviously, with Lancaster, our partner for Catawba, regarding the potential for expansion in this time frame?
We have. They have it on the same timeline for expansion as we do, which is within the next, I believe, 4 years. Obviously, they may want it sooner, but they have it in the same timeline that we do.
Mr. Matthews, and also Sweet, I don't see the short line water extension program here, so that would be an additional item that we would have to look at and consider funding for.
That would be under the other projects as well.
Okay.
And what I'd like to do, obviously, the board can add any projects as necessary. The operations center is not included. You don't see that in there. That's an other projects item. There are other ways to fund a short line program. I will tell you that is not an inexpensive program, and on a per applicant basis, we spend a lot of money. And that, I want to make it clear, that is ratepayer money that we are spending in order to extend water lines to persons who are not customers at this point in time. It's a wonderful thing that we do, but there is a cost associated with it. So if the board wanted to consider other alternatives for how we fund that, we certainly could discuss that. Special assessments are a way that can be done. I'm not saying that they're easy, I'm not saying that they're simple, but there are other ways to do that. But the board could certainly say, I'd like to see that a number added in there for short line. Because what we do is we take the board's decision, and you say, listen, I'd like for you to do X, Y, and Z. We take the estimates for those projects. We then plug that into our water and sewer rate model, and then that yields what we have to do as far as future rates for that particular item. And what I've heard from the board, and I certainly, am sensitive to that, is we're going to create this rate, if this is a water project, it is a rate for the water. If it's a sewer project, it's a rate for sewer. So you're not blending the rates, you're saying if these projects are for sewer, that goes into calculating what that sewer rate is. If this is rate for water, it calculates that rate for water. We blended those in the past. I know there were some concerns with that, so I want to, once we know what the board wants to do or doesn't want to do, we'll come back to you with those impacts.
Do we, out of these projects here, do we have like a priority type ranking that would be good for the utility? Can we kind of narrow these things down to what would be the top priority versus smaller priorities, or low versus high? Is that possible that we can look at it that way?
So if you would ask me today, what would be the top priority, I would say storage tanks. That's probably top priority. Obviously, some of these parallel lines are still important, because even if we have storage, it's still going to create some other issues where the transmission is. I can certainly have the staff sit down and look at this and try to do a better ranking of it. Understand that this is still a 15-year capital program. So when we tell you that, there's some things that are going to be later in time, and some things, and so that kind of is a priority the way we're structuring it. And the reason we do that is you can't plan a utility 1 year at a time. We have to plan it multiple years at a time. So we can certainly show you how we've laid it out from year 1 to year 15, and you could see that those projects, and that would probably be how we would say priority-wise, that would be. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, to get to your point, Brian, if the spreadsheet that's behind the PowerPoint actually shows you the 15 years, and it shows you by water, by sewer, those projects and sort of where they fall in the year. So if, Brian's making the point that the year is really the priority. If it was urgent, it'd be sooner obviously in the planning year. If it can wait, it'd be farther out. And so, the spreadsheet will show you that.
And so the reason why that's not on the screen is it's too much. You couldn't see it, so it is in your notebook, so it is available. To Hung's point, and I want to say that, is if the board says, listen, there's some projects that we see in outer years, and we really don't want to include those in your rate model. I mean, obviously, we're going to do what you tell us to do. And that doesn't mean that need goes away, and it doesn't mean that it's not going to create where we have to think about the system a little bit differently. These are all sort of kind of intertwined, so when you do one, there is still a reason why you need to do number 2 or number 3. Certainly, if the board said fund all of the water tanks, we're not going to do any of the parallel water line replacements, obviously that's what we would do, but we'd also have to look at what impact did that do to the transmission system, and by delaying that, what other issues is that creating that we need to address.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I think one of the things we need to consider, and use the water tank as an example, that low water pressure affects the safety of our citizens. We had a situation a couple of years ago where we built a water tank up in Providence, behind Providence Fire Department, because we had neighborhoods that had 2-story houses that couldn't get water up on the second level, and the fire hydrants were not effective. So I think, from a safety standpoint, these tanks are important.
I do want to make very clear that whatever the board gives us direction as including the rate model, you are not voting to approve any rate increases at this point in time. You're not actually making a decision that those projects will be built. It is about being able to go in and determine what the impact would be based on some direction. That has to come back to the board. Then you make a decision on ultimately what you feel you can or cannot afford. And that basically whittles us down to what we can and cannot do. So I want to make clear, whatever direction you give is not a final direction at this point.
I have one question I just make before I take this binder home with me. I just want to verify, did you say earlier in the presentation, I don't want to spend time flipping pages, that there was a need for 4 water tanks?
Yes, ma'am.
4.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, there's actually, either new or expanded, there's a need for those shown on our master plan.
Okay, so on the master plan, are those 4 under the storage tank rehabilitation? So so the new tanks is part of the rehabilitation?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that wrong? Okay.
We have 10 existing water tanks. The rehabilitation program is to maintain those 10.
Okay, my mistake.
Okay, so I just wanted to verify, under 2024, I don't see anything on here, unless you can point it out to me, an estimation for 4 new water tanks.
So if you look at this list that's currently shown on the screen, the EST stands for elevated storage tank. So those are the 4, and those are those pink pressure zone areas that we were looking at earlier where the storage was deficient. So there's, each pressure zone needs to have its own storage.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't see it on the
Sure.
spreadsheet. Thank you very much. So would that have to be added to the spreadsheet?
So, just for everyone's benefit, this is the spreadsheet. So there's a lot to be taken in on this. But if you would, if you can just direct me to where you're looking, and I will do my
Very last page.
very last page.
Under fiscal year 2024.
Okay, so you're seeing there's a number of lines that are in a darker gray with bold text. That is the renewal and replacement projects. So if you're looking for the elevated storage tank projects, if I can direct you to the first page. And it's the 3rd one up from the bottom. You'll see the Indian Trail tank, 853 West elevated storage tank. So that, the first couple of pages are where you're going to see the elevated storage
Got
tanks.
it.
And I do also want to point out, there's a reason there's nothing in FY24 in the first couple of pages, and that's because
We're in FY24.
We're in FY24, so we wouldn't be starting any of these projects until at least FY25.
Right. And the reason that the last page is replacement and renewal, if you recall, there is a slide which actually gives you the totals, which says, okay, if you did water, wastewater, R&R, R&R is all by itself. That's just managing the system as is. And that's the one Hung put up, which is 128.6 million. That is where, that back page equals all of those projects.
In speed reading the spreadsheet, that was the only place I saw tanks. So,
Yeah, EST is not clear that means elevated storage tank, so.
And Mr. Matthews, on the tanks, really, that's of the 15-year capital plan, those are, and this is kind of an understatement, those are some of the cheapest projects on the 15-year capital plan, right?
They are some of the least expensive.
That's a good way to put it.
They are some of the
I didn't mean
least
to say
expensive
cheapest.
that we have to deal with, absolutely. Now, again, when the board gives us some direction, if there are things that you choose not to include, then we have to then look and see, well, does that create us having to do something different because we're not including some of those transmission projects?
I just want to say tonight has been very helpful. This has been very well put together, great information. Thank you very much.
And obviously, if the board is not ready to give us some direction, that's certainly fine. That we're gonna need that, and you don't have to give me that tonight, but we will need direction from the board on how you want to move forward with the capital plan for water. So let's talk about wastewater now.
Brian, before you go.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you one thing. On this Indian Trail tank new, on the spreadsheet, it shows 1.182 million for land acquisition. I thought we bought that a couple of years ago, because that was the Johnson property.
So yes, it does show land acquisition because the cost estimates are necessarily conservative. One of the things about the Indian Trail tank is we do own a piece of property, and we did anticipate siting this tank there. One of the things that we need to evaluate as part of the updated master plan is that the right location? It's been a number of years since we acquired that property. So we need to validate the location, but we did include an allocation for land acquisition if necessary.
It doesn't mean that we will move it, but if we feel that a better site is better suited, then obviously we want to account for cost if we have to move that
So these
location.
numbers could even decrease.
They could, yes, sir.
Yeah,
For that particular one, for that particular project.
Yeah, it goes back to the discussion on cost estimating. So we've got a high degree of variability right now, but as that project gets further and further refined, those costs get tighter and tighter. So that just informs our decision-making.
All right, Hung, let's go to wastewater, if you don't mind. So with wastewater, did the same thing, broke this down, show you, okay, these are the recommended projects for the wastewater system that really aren't about capacity, so to speak. They're really more about the system. You'll see that total shows up at 115, almost $116 million. You do see that the East Fork Interceptor improvements are shown at the top of that, and then that is recommended for the board to consider. Obviously, and Commissioner Helms did bring this up, if the strategy is that we're no longer going to permit in that area, well, then you can choose not to do that project. You say, we are not going to have a parallel sewer line. We're not going to increase the ability for that East Fork to handle that flow. That's certainly a strategy the board can take. But this is looking at it from a system perspective. Obviously, that one is one that the board would have to certainly consider. And then obviously you have the capacity projects. Again, there's no requirement for the board to expand capacity, but if you choose to expand capacity, we have to build that into the capital plan. We're showing you that there is a potential expansion of 12 Mile Creek in the out years in this 15-year plan, and that's to go from 9 million gallons to 12 million gallons, and then potential for Site B. There is a possibility, if the board chooses to move forward with Site B, that you may not need the expansion from 3MG to at the 12 mile. That's not known at this time. A lot of that's going to depend on how long it actually takes to get an expansion for Site B. Are we talking about that being in 15 years? Are we talking about that being in less? So it's really about what is the timing and how does that play into that expansion. But in this 15-year window of an estimated CIP, we showed you that just so that you would be aware of that as a potential cost. Any questions about the wastewater side of that? Okay. Let's go to the next item, which is really the other projects. And the other projects, we have some estimates for those.
We don't.
Well,
I
we do
don't.
we do for the operations center. So for the operations center, we had an estimate for that one that was roughly 13 million for that expansion of the operations center. The other items, you don't really have a total for those. And when I say Crooked Creek, we really don't know what it's going to cost to operate that plant for an extended period of time. There are things that we are going to have to do with that plant to operate it for another 10, 15, 20 years, whatever the decision is for the board for a new plant. And we're going to have to build that into our needs for capital, because that's not built into there. We don't know what that would be. The Poplin force main discharge. What, if any, appetite the board has for doing anything related to the odor issues at the Poplin force main. Some of those are relatively inexpensive. Some of those are very expensive. Again, not built into this model, nor is the short line program that's not built into this model. So ultimately, we're going to need some feedback from the board on what do you want to include or not include, and then we're going to have to kind of put a placeholder and put some funding in there to be able to say, okay, what potential rate impact is that going to have? Yes, sir.
No, the Operations Center expansion, that's the Union County Global Water headquarters.
Yes, as Hung said, that is Union County Global Water, that's correct. And as I mentioned before, that is tied to facility needs related to our judicial center and a lot of other facility needs that we have. It's all sort of cobbled together. So I'm getting the impression that the board is not really, and I understand that, it's a lot thrown at you, that you're not really prepared to give us any direction tonight. What I would ask is that the board sort of give me an idea when you would like for us to bring this back to get some formal direction from you on what to include in the rate model, because we're going to need to do that as quickly as we can. So if you can sort of give me some parameters on when you'd like to come back and consider this and give us some direction, that would be very helpful for us.
Sometime in January, would that be good? Phil?
Second meeting in January.
Second meeting in January, if the board would be okay for that. What we would ask, though, obviously, this is a lot of information. If in going through it, you have additional questions, you need additional information, please let us know so that we can give this to you. We can sit down with you, talk about any questions or concerns you might have prior to that meeting. I want to take this time to say, if it came across that we were trying to paint you into a corner, I apologize. That is not our intention. It was really to show you the full breadth of everything that's facing the utility. Ultimately, you have to give us direction, and those decisions then play into what our strategy is for the future. So I apologize if you felt like we were trying to paint you into a corner. That is not the case. It is really just trying to make you aware of all the potential needs that the utility has. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. Are there any questions that I can address at this point in time?
I'll just say this, Brian, that, and to all of our staff, I'll echo Commissioner Merrill's comments that this was very informative. I certainly appreciate all the efforts of our staff to put this information together for us. So thank you.
Any further comments from the board members? All right. Well, Merry Christmas, and thank you for attending.
Thank you for your time.
All in favor of the motion to adjourn? Aye. Aye.
We got done before 8:30, I will tell you that. So.